Okay, so welcome to this is week one of the Ancient Wisdom series episodes. I don't really know what we're going to call it, but today we are going to be talking about Dharma. If you don't know what that is, just hang tight because I'm sure you know of it in another kind of framework. We're going to touch on how Dharma relates to mental health. And then my expert of a guest, Gabrielle, is going to talk a lot about not only the mental health aspect, but capitalism and Dharma. So if you're like, how does all that go together? Just hang in there, stick through because it's really fascinating, honestly. So, Dharma, if you don't know what that is, it is a Buddhist, Hindu, and yogic concept that really just means the law of the universe. Like there's a set of laws and principles that govern the universe, and everything in the universe abides by this truth or this law. And that's how things, seemingly operate flawlessly. When it comes to individuals living by their own dharma, the idea is that everyone is born with a specific set of these principles. And by living their truth, living this truth that was wired within them, that's how one can best not only serve self, but others. Because the idea of Dharma, um, it's not an isolated concept. It really is a selfless idea. So, in Western terms, you've probably heard Dharma described as your purpose. Like, what is your purpose in life? Um, and I think that it's one of those things where when someone hears that, they're just like, oh, haha, my purpose in life. Either they think that purpose is only meant for like the spiritual monks who found this like higher consciousness with the universe and that's their purpose, or they're just like, oh, not everyone has a purpose, whatever, it's kind of cliche and like silly. Um and the reason for that, I think, is why people think that it's just this like unattainable or kind of ambiguous thing, is because we have this idea that purpose is something we have to go out there and find. We need to try this avenue or try this avenue. And it's really outside of ourselves. Like we have to dip our toes into all these different kind of, I don't know, fields or areas of interest until we feel like, oh yeah, that's meant for me. But Dharma is essentially the remembering, because remember, Dharma is something that's already wired within us. So the reason some people really can't find their Dharma is because there's nothing to go out and find. It's really a self-excavation project, really. It's going inside, peeling back the layers of programming, conditioning, all the socialization that, you know, it's inevitable, peeling back these veils and these layers, and understanding that just like trees are here to give us oxygen, and that is their dharma, that is a tree's truth. It's not going to go and try to be a really pretty butterfly. It wouldn't work. It would fall flat. And so, that tree is born with that function, with that purpose. And we have so many trees, luckily. Um and and so the idea is we are not different than anything else in nature. Even though we feel so separate,
Mhm.
we're just as much have these roles that we should abide by. Just like any creatures, or you don't find penguins living in like a tropical hot air. That's not for them. So, we don't find that. But with humans, our brains are much more evolved, and we live in a really structured kind of society, and we have a lot of free will. And so all of that mixed together really clouds us on finding our Dharma. So that's really what Dharma is. It's essentially your purpose, it's the remembering your soul's truth. So I'm going to share a little bit about my path to finding or discovering my Dharma. And then Gabrielle is going to share. And her story, I love it so much because a lot of times with Dharma talk, it's just people in the spiritual community talking about Dharma. And, that's great and all, but not everyone was born with this wiring to work or operate in the spiritual field. And Gabrielle believes she's very much living her Dharma, and she has a government position. And so I love that so much because it's like, look, this isn't just for the monks or the energy workers or the intuitives, right? This is literally everyone has these seeds in them, and when the conditions are right, quote unquote, then this Dharma can bloom and blossom. Okay. Whew. Well, let me welcome Gabrielle. So, hi, Gabrielle. Thank you for hopping on today.
Hey, I'm not muted, right?
Nope, you're not
Okay,
muted.
great.
We hear you.
Hello.
Do you want to just tell us a little bit about your background and what you're doing now?
Sure. Yes. So, my background is in social work. I got my bachelor's degree and master's degree in social work, but I am a more macro level social worker. So, as Nina said, I do have a government position. And I, when I went to grad school, I went to Columbia and I wanted to study policy because I think that social work can sometimes get understood as just like the clinical side of it. But there's a lot of things that you can do with social work. So that really gave me a social justice background to the way that I approach policy, and to the way that I approach programming. And yeah, that's I now work for the Department of Parks and Recreation for DC, and I am the Director Special Assistant. And a lot of my job focuses on, other than, administrative duties and things like that, a lot of my job comes with researching the benefits of recreation in cities and how it creates equity in communities, which I really love my job. And yeah, that's pretty much, that's my background.
AKA, she's super smart. And yeah, so we're really lucky to have her here because we often have like similar ideas about things, but we look at it from such different angles. And I think it creates just such a beautiful kind of comprehensive view. So
I agree.
yeah, it's
I
fun.
agree. It is fun.
Okay, so if you read my book, then you already know the story, so sorry. But for me, my Dharma really came about like 2 or 3 years ago at this point. And I didn't know the word Dharma at the time. FYI, that's a more recent discovery. So when I was younger, I think is where we have to start. When I was younger, I always was playing teacher and I was always playing mom. So mom and teacher were my favorite things to do. And whenever anybody would ask me, like, what are you going to be when you grow up? I would say teacher. Like, I want to be a teacher. And I really felt that. I was like, I love the idea of having a group of people together and like teaching them. But then as I got a little older, I hear people make comments like, oh, all kids want to be teachers and firefighters. So I was
Mm.
like, oh, maybe that's just like a kid thing. Like maybe I don't really want to be a teacher. It's just like the only like one of three occupations I know of as a kid, right? And so when I'm finishing high school, it's time to think about what you want to study in college. And I ended up studying criminology and minoring in global terrorism. And yeah, like, how does that relate to being a teacher? It doesn't, because I was really swayed by like
Mm.
comments and things that people would make about teaching. Um, and the reason that I chose that particular kind of field was there was an assembly at our school and they were talking about human trafficking, which I had never heard of. It was a really new term at the time, for me at least. And the woman who was speaking, she was running like, she was a victims advocate. So they would, when people would be rescued or there be survivors from human trafficking, she was coordinating basically like a reentry kind of program for them, you know, teaching them, housing them, things of that nature. And I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. In my mind, I didn't put together that there's a teaching element, a community element. And so I'm like, okay, I guess I should go into this field. So by the end of college, it's like, oh gosh, what do you do? Oh my God, I want a 9 to 5 job. Like, that seems like what everyone else is doing. I want that. I'm going to have financial freedom finally. And I get a 9 to 5 job. And at first, it's exciting because you're getting a steady income. I was right out of school. I started like a month after, and it's pretty good money for like I was 21 when I graduated. So I was young. Um, and it's like, yeah, this is cool. Like, I can book trips where I want to go, whatever. But after like 6 months to a year, it was like I felt a suffocating feeling every time I would have to wake up to go to work. And while I was there, I would be like at my desk, and like sometimes tears would be coming down. Like, it was like spiraling into this deep depression, right? And I just hated it. I just felt like I was not connected at all to what I was doing. It was like the most stifling environment for me, right? It can work for others, but for me, it was not. And it was like, what are you talking about? Like, you get this job out of college. You should be really grateful and happy that you have this, and like, it's a 9 to 5 job. You have your weekends off. Like, that's the American dream, right? Not for me. Um, and so it took a while, and I was like, I want to teach. Like, I want to teach. I cannot sit at a desk. Like, I hate it. Like, I found that I enjoyed training the new people. And so, I'm like looking at all these ways I can teach and this and that, because I didn't have an education degree. Eventually, I got certified to teach English as a foreign language, and I moved to Italy, and I was teaching the Italian military in Rome. And it was really a way for me to make money while living abroad, so I could travel. And I was like, yeah, when I get home, I'll find something related to teaching English. And then I would like be teaching my students. It was all one-on-one, and I'd prepare the lessons, and then we'd always get off topic and be talking about these like really deep life like lessons. And I was like, oh, if all of them are bringing that up to me randomly, like, maybe there's a vibe here. Like, I really liked that. And so when I came home, I was like, all right, I'm going to teach English, but I'm not feeling so connected to teaching like in an academic setting. I was like, I like connecting with people, and how can I do that out like in an unconventional way, because the conventional ways were not working for me. I just kept feeling just like drained and exhausted and just like mentally not well. And so I took the route that I fell into it, but I really believe that, you know, you fall into things that maybe are a little risky is because it resonates deeply with you. So the holistic life coaching, now the energy work, and I get to connect with people. And, you know, the way I do it is I don't just do your energy work and send you on your way. I like to sit there and explain to you, you know, why this might be the way it is or what you can do to help with this, and give you the tools to help yourself. And so that's where I have landed. So you can see it took like 5 years to get there. And I'm not saying that's going to be the case for everyone. I just didn't have the awareness at the time, like right out of college. I didn't have this kind of awareness. And we're going to get into why I didn't have this kind of awareness. It has a lot to do with the structures in place. So before we get into that, Gabrielle's story of, you know, tapping into her Dharma, I love it so much. So please take it away.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting when you say that we have such different, different sex, but like kind of very similar. Because I also wanted to be a teacher when I was growing up, and I don't really know what made me stop wanting to be a teacher. I think it was because me wanting to be a teacher was rooted in the fact that I loved kids, and then I realized kids don't love their teacher. So I was like, I don't want to be a teacher. So I decided to switch to I was going to be a guidance counselor. And that's why I did human services, but I had a focus in community education because I wanted to study school systems and things like that. But one thing that I was reflecting on, because when you asked earlier, like how did I come to figure out that like what my Dharma was, I realized that I have been living my Dharma pretty much my entire life, but I just didn't know the word and I didn't know that I was. And I can think about times in my life that I wasn't living it, and I wasn't as happy or energetic, and I didn't know that. So I should probably say what what my interest is. Um, so how I ended up realizing that, I would say that my Dharma is to collect a lot of information and then to share that in a comprehensive way. So research is really what I feel like is my Dharma. And I think that I came to realize this because when I was in late high school or college, I would be writing papers and I would be like, I love this. Like I loved writing papers. And I know that people would be like, that's mad weird, but I loved to write papers. I loved collecting the information. I loved creating my argument. And when I stopped college and I started to work at a 9 to 5 job, I wasn't really in a job where I was able to explain something to people. So it's interesting that you were saying that you found it from these conversations, because I also find myself, if I'm not in a situation where I get to take information and then explain it to others, I'm not happy. And I found that I would be, because I wasn't getting it in my professional life or anywhere else, I would do it on Facebook. Like it was like, I love to have discourse online so that I can do research and figure out how to craft my argument. It makes me so happy. Like I'm so excited when I read something and I'm like, oh, and this means that. And I just, yeah, and it's interesting because when I realized that that's what I was meant to do in my life, I started to think back to my childhood and things that made me really excited. And I think that what Nina's talking about when she's saying she loves my story is because when I was a kid and whenever I wanted to do something that my dad didn't want me to do, he would say, you know, Gabrielle, if you write me a paper and bring me sources as to why you should be able to do what you want to do, then I will let you do it as long as you prove it to me. And this was how I settled pretty much anything. And the rule with my dad was that if he said no, then it was no, and I had to accept it. But I would get lost in websites of like how I was right. And the biggest example I thought was like, my dad told me I couldn't watch Degrassi. If you aren't familiar with Degrassi, it's kind of like a teen soap opera that handles some pretty mature topics. And my dad saw an episode where they were discussing something he thought was inappropriate. So he was like, you can't watch this anymore. But it was my favorite show. So I was devastated. I was like, I have to be able to watch this. And so my dad said, fine, if you can write me an article, or if you can write me a research paper as to why you should be able to watch this. Now, mind you, I'm 11. I've never then it was definitely not like an APA format, but I found a whole bunch of websites and articles that were talking about how even though Degrassi dealt with mature themes, it showed the consequences of these themes. And so, therefore it was a good show for lessons for young people to kind of learn how to maneuver things that were inevitably going to happen. And my dad read my paper, and he let me watch Degrassi. And I felt so accomplished. And so I think that retroactively, I've realized I've always been living my Dharma, because then we always do research in school. That's something that that's a part of the school system. And in my past job, even though I didn't do research, a lot of it was understanding what DC laws were so that I could explain them to constituents. So I've kind of always been living it. It's just recently that I realized, oh, I'm so happy when I do these kind of things, because this is what I'm meant to do. This is my purpose, for lack of a better word. And I think that something that's interesting is that I kind of realized I really like research while I was in grad school, and I tried to make that my career path. And I think that I realized, oh, I don't like it in that sense. And I think that there's a big confusion, of course, of is this my purpose, or is this my career path? And they're not necessarily the same thing. I'm lucky I get to work in my Dharma, but I think that sometimes you can get muddled and oh, but is this going to make me money? And we get so wrapped up in that. So yeah, hope that made sense and was not jumbled.
Oh, that was awesome. I will listen to that story forever. I love it so much. I hope your dad listens to this. But oh yeah, so you made a good point about Dharma. So someone's Dharma is not, it is their inner essence. It is their calling, what their soul needs to do while they have this human contract on earth. It doesn't mean that Gabrielle's Dharma was to work with Parks and Rec, and that's it, right? It can manifest in a lot of different ways. In any research job or research arena that she felt, where she was doing the research and then able to essentially regurgitate it in a more digestible way for others, that would make her happy. And she's right. She's lucky that her purpose aligns in such a way with service and success, because it's making her money. And that's in my opinion, that is the ideal situation, because we have to make money to live, to meet our basic needs. There's no ifs, ands, or you have to. And so if and when those can align, that's best case scenario. But it doesn't always have to be that way. So your Dharma doesn't have to make you money. But if you are in a position where, you can support yourself somehow, or you are supported financially speaking, you can still live out your Dharma, just not in an income-based way. But if that doesn't work for you, and you're the jobs that I have just drain the life out of me, but I have to support myself, then it's all right, it's really time for some deep discovery on how we can get these two things to align. So yeah, any thoughts on that, Gabrielle?
Yeah, and I think that that's what makes it difficult. It kind of clouds our understanding of Dharma, right? Because we live in this capitalist society, and the way that we frame, like Americans frame Dharma or purpose, is so related to our career, and it's so related to whatever we're doing to money. And it's important to note and like repeat over and over again that purpose does not equal productivity, because we live in a country and overall a world really that just values productivity more than it values the human spirit, anything like that. And it's just, I think it's draining. And I look at people like my mom, who I think that her Dharma has to do with art. That's something that she loves. It's her passion. But unfortunately, it's a career. If you look at it from a career standpoint, that's a less stable source of income than being an accountant, which is what my mother is. And I can see that it takes a toll on her, that she's not living in what she wants to be doing. And it's, you know, many conversations I have with her, and it sucks, because it's like she can't. I mean, she can, but we live in a system where you'd have to take into account how you can make money, as well as how you can really live your Dharma and live your truth. And I think the fact that we have to make this money can really be a huge hindrance in finding what our Dharma is, and, you know, rediscovering ourselves.
Yep. And I think in a capitalist society, it's not by accident that purpose is framed on what job you have or what career you have. It's very much, you are a worker in this system, and
I am so sorry. My
you need to
boss
take
is
it.
calling me. I
Go
am
for it.
so sorry.
You're good. It's very much, you are a product of this bigger system, and go find a purpose, go find your place in this system where you can work to just keep pumping out the money, the money, the money, the money. And it also, you know, on the flip side, it's like, oh, well, if your purpose doesn't align with our, you know, with our capitalist ideals, then maybe your purpose is really just your hobby. Okay, so Gabrielle just had to step away to grab a call from her boss, but we are back. And yeah, so all I was saying was that in a capitalist mold, you either find your purpose in that system or it becomes a hobby. And I know Gabrielle has a lot of thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I mean, if we're going to tackle the beast that is capitalism, I think that we first have to understand, I think, because there are some people that will say, you know, oh, it's not that capitalism is this, it's greedy people, or it's not that capitalism is this, it's the fact that America is racist or sexist, and that's why capitalism can't thrive here. But it's important to understand that capitalism in its nature is manipulative and exploitative, and it really doesn't matter about the I guess, moral compass of the people who lead it. And the reason for that being is because capitalism puts the bottom line above anything else. It puts profit above anything else. And if we're going to look at it more simplified, if you have a company, right? If you have a company and you want to make more money, you have to use that money to pay your workers. So what does that mean? You have to use that money. You want to pay your workers less so that the company is creating more. And the reason it's not just about being greedy is because, let's say that you want to be ethical, and you don't want to exploit your workers. Another company in your market will, and then you will lose your business to them because they will be able to produce lower prices for the consumer. This is a very economic way of looking at it, but it's important. They will be able to provide a lower price for the consumer, and the consumers we're mostly made of workers. America is mostly workers. And so the most people that are consumers can't really afford to choose the more ethical choice. A really good example that I like to use is the store American Apparel. American Apparel was a store that its whole thing was that it made its clothes in America and it paid its workers $15 an hour, so that they have a livable wage. $15 an hour isn't livable, but when it was made, I think it might have actually been a livable wage at that time. And they sold quality products that were like staples. I would say, do you remember American Apparel?
Yep.
They sold things that I think were like, they didn't really go out of style. They were basics. They were like basic things for your wardrobe. But the thing is, because they paid their workers a fair wage and because they didn't outsource their labor to another country where they could exploit that labor, they had to have ridiculous prices, or what me as a lower consumer, like a, not rich consumer, would consider a ridiculous price for a tank top. But the consumer doesn't really have the money or privilege to think, oh, why is this tank top $30? It's $30 so that the people who made it can be paid a livable wage. Meanwhile, you go to Forever 21, which has gone under for a whole other reason, where the tank tops are $5, and you're like, I'm going to buy the $5 one. So what happened to American Apparel? It couldn't sustain its business model because its competitors weren't doing the same thing. Its competitors were outsourcing labor so they could pay less. They could pay them less, and therefore they can keep their products cheap and they can keep making a certain amount of money. And I say all of this to say, because in order for us to keep workers to keep working in those conditions, right, there has to be a level of manipulation. There has to be, because people don't just accept abuse without any type of manipulation. And that goes in any situation. So I think that like a lot of pro-capitalism people think they believe in this illusion of choice that if you have a job that's treating you terribly, you can just go to another job. But considering we don't have government assistance that's sustainable. So if you have a family, you work in this company that's paying you maybe under the table if you're undocumented, which is a big way that they manipulate workers in that. But they're paying you this certain amount of money. You can't afford to say, oh, I can't take this, I'm going to go somewhere else. You can't afford to, because you have to pay to meet needs. And so capitalism thrives off that. They have to create a system where people believe that their purpose is to work. They have to create a system where we think that work is the only reason that we are here, or else people wouldn't put up with it. They wouldn't put up with the exploitation. And so how that relates to Dharma is that, we specifically do package our purpose as a career path, because in America, all we think about is work. How do we get to work? Like when you were 5 years old and people asked you, what did you want to be? They were asking you, what job do you want to have? Which is sad when you really think about it. Like, I'm 5 years old. I don't want to like aspire to work. But yeah, I think that, that type of environment really clouds your ability to see, like, what am I meant for? What is my truth? Because your environment is telling you your truth doesn't matter. You're here to be productive and you're here to participate in this money-driven system. So I think if you are somebody who's not as privileged as me and Nina, because we have a lot more economic access than maybe some other people, you don't have time to really you don't have the same time. I don't want to say that you don't have time, because you definitely do. You don't have the same time that we do to really have that self-excavation and figure out, what am I meant to do? Because you're like, hey, I have to go work at Ross. It really doesn't that's what I have to do. And so we don't really foster an environment where we can really get to know ourselves.
Yeah. And it's not, so you might be hearing like, oh, so we're just supposed to live in just like a society where no one works. And it's like, let's take it back to the ancient days, right? Everyone had a role. You had the ones who were the medicine women. You had the ones, tilling the land. Everyone had their role and they fit into this. It was very much a village essence, and in that village, to keep the village sustained, people did what they were naturally good at, or what they were called
Mm-hmm.
to. We
Mm-hmm.
can't do that anymore because we don't live in those smaller communities where our Dharma can serve us and our community. It's much harder to fit Dharma into this. One, we live like really isolated lives, especially here,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not very community based. And so you're asking someone who, we're taught like home ownership. That's the American dream. We're like, all right, you live in this big box by yourself or with like a very nuclear family,
Oof.
and it's really expensive, or you have to rent, which is even more expensive. And to live, you have to make money. You can't It's not a community based setting, right? You can't just go pick food from the land, and you can't exchange your goods with each other and things like that. And so we're like miserable, and it's like, oh, why is mental health like really plaguing us? And why do we just like, the richest nation on earth, and we're just miserable? And it's like on top of this like really really unsustainable model, in my opinion. But,
Unsustainable is like
right?
synonymous with capitalism.
Yeah, and then you have that where it worked for a couple of the previous generations, because it was like, oh, the American dream, you work. They could work and live, and they were like, oh, I'm happy, or so they thought. But now the collective consciousness is just so much more awakened, and I hate to use like the woke or
Mm.
spiritual awakening, but that's what it is. Like, we're much more evolved on a mass scale. There's a great awakening happening, and it doesn't fit into this mold very
Right.
well.
Right. I mean, I also would add that the when we ended World War II, right, we were living before World War II, we were living a lot more. You know what? I'm going to change that. I'm sorry. Before the Industrial Revolution, we were living a lot closer to what our ancestors were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we've gone into, and this isn't to say that the Industrial Revolution or that inventions or anything like that are bad, because they're not.
Right.
But there was a shift in focus into productivity at the expense of humanity that was really a problem. I mean, they literally had children working in factories at that time. So it's everything that has been done has been to keep up that high productivity, because that equals high profit, and then those people at the top can live however they want. They can find their
Mm-hmm.
dharma. They can live however they want.
Yep.
But most of us can't.
Yeah. Yep. And
So
it's not
yeah,
by choice
and it's not by
always.
choice.
It I like how you said it just stripped the humanity from us, and humanity is very much this connection to earth and source and environment. And the past, what, 60 to 80 years, things have like really drastically changed, and our humanity now looks like, oh, you got to go to college, you got to get this degree, and you got to jump into the workforce. That is it's like, well, that's what we have to do. That's normal. Duh. Like, why would you
Right.
complain about that? Why do you want these handouts? And it's sad to hear people talk like that, because they don't understand that this is very much a capitalistic
Yeah.
conditioning placed upon them.
It's also new, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's when we think about how long humanity has existed, that's new. And it's interesting that you said you brought up mental health, because I think something that I've heard that's also new is people will say, oh, it's crazy. I feel like more and more people have anxiety, more and more people have depression. And we're like, why is that? Why are more people like that? And I do think that, some people will say, and there's truth to it, that there is mental health concerns are normalized, so people are more comfortable talking about it. But I think that what people don't really realize is that, things like depression and anxiety, they are environmentally created. And I think that, there is this narrative, and I would argue that this narrative is pushed by pharmaceutical companies, so that they're able to sell you medication. But there's this narrative that mental illnesses are chemical imbalances in your brain, and they are not chemical imbalances in your brain. Mental illnesses do cause chemical imbalances in your brain, but that's not something that is inherent. And these responses in your brain when you have anxiety or depression or things like that are very similar to people who suffer trauma. And there's also a huge correlation with people who have suffered trauma to having anxiety and depression. And so when we look at it from that framework, it's kind of like, wow, we are all traumatized by our environment. And that is why the cases of anxiety and depression are rising. There's no biological basis for mental illness. It's not true. And I'm not trying to say that depression isn't real, or that anxiety isn't real, or anything like that. But I'm trying to say that what is considered neurotypical and what is considered neurodivergent really have to do with who is considered productive and who is not considered productive. And I think that there are a lot of terms in mental health that you can see that, like, I'm neurodivergent, but I am high functioning. What does high functioning mean? High functioning means that I'm able to be productive in this capitalistic structure. And that's all that it means. Nina sent me a wonderful post earlier today that really pointed out that really all we have is neurodiversity. We all have different brain workings, but yet we live in a structure that kind of focuses so much on labels, so that it's like, this person can be productive, this person can't. And that is pretty much all that it's based off of. And diagnoses are really they're only central to selling drugs, and they're deeply embedded in institutional and economic policies. um, it's literally I mean, I don't want to go too far into politics or neoliberalism, but it transforms people with complaints into people with diseases. And it kind of obscures the root causes of mental illness. It doesn't acknowledge, it kind of says, oh, you're just like that. And I'm trying to be very light with my words, because I don't want to discredit anybody who has lived with depression or anxiety or different mental illnesses. That is really truly like that is a real suffering. But there is a lot of it that is exacerbated by the fact that you're being told that you're not created for this world, but really what it is that this world isn't created for you. It's not. You have been excluded from the productive model, and that's really all that it is. So it's this cyclical nature. And then to bring it back to Dharma, it's there isn't when we are in this structure and we're suffering from depression and we're suffering from anxiety, how are we supposed to have a self-excavation? Because it's like, if it's kind of like, if we're a dig site, right? Like if we're like an archaeological dig site and our Dharma's right there at the bottom, it's kind of like erosion of capitalism is literally putting more and more stuff on top of it, that's making it even harder and harder to dig down, to be like, what, what am I here for? And it's really sad. it's sad and it's exploitative because it's on purpose, because the more you have to excavate and dig under there, the less you'll want to, which I think, that's human nature. But so I'm gonna
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You really opened up. Like, I can see people, I just feel like it might trigger some people, to be honest, but I think it's going to validate a lot of people as well.
yeah, I think to add on to, just to kind of put a personal spin on it, and I am a social worker, so I am familiar with the DSM-5. I am familiar with what, are the symptoms of each mental illness that's listed. And I know that from my personal experience, when you feel neurodivergent and you feel like you're not meant for this world, you start to seek answers, and you start to try to figure out how you can label yourself. And you're looking at these symptoms and you're like, well, I have some of these but not all of them, and I have some of these but not all of them. Well, maybe I have all of these and I need to take medicine for all of these. Or maybe I have, maybe I don't have this one, maybe I don't have that one. And it's not really helpful, because again, we're not treating the roots. We're not looking at the symptoms. We're trying to diagnose ourselves. We're trying to say, why don't I fit into this world? I'm moving at this pace and everyone else is moving at this pace, so I must have ADHD. Instead of just being like, this is where my brain is comfortable, and the world isn't moving at the pace that I would like to be moving at. And that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with me, or that there's anything wrong with the way that my brain works. I just want to say that to be a little more empathetic. Like, I do understand, but it is rooted in, they want to sell us medicine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's like, if you think about Eastern versus Western beliefs, philosophies, medicines, what we call alternative medicine was truly the primary form of medicine for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, more recently, especially with colonization, we're calling it alternative, whatever. But the thing that I love most about Eastern medicine and holistic practices is you're a sick person, right? And you have a symptom of like high blood pressure, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Western medicine will give you medicine for the high blood pressure. Eastern medicine is looking at what is the root cause.
Yeah.
Let's treat this,
Mm-hmm.
actually treat it. Well, let's actually get to the root cause of it, so that way we can actually, give you a treatment plan that will heal you, or, help you, whatever. And so the same thing with mental health. It's like, oh, you have depression and anxiety. Okay, chemical imbalance medicine. Where it's like, let's look further, right?
Right.
Maybe it was childhood trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was some other form of trauma. It could even be a trauma in utero. Whatever it was,
right.
something caused that.
Right. Or it could just be the cyclical nature of capitalism that you are stuck
and that's
in.
right. And like a lot of it is definitely, when you hear the people like, I'm just depressed and I don't know why, or some people know, they're like, I have these traumas and it's like caused me to have this mental health issue.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not always like that childhood trauma that, with an abusive parent that caused it. Capitalism, in a sense, can be viewed as a trauma causing and sparking
it is
these mental health issues.
Exactly.
And so that's what Gabrielle was saying. She wasn't, and correct me if I'm wrong, like, she weren't saying at all that we don't really have these illnesses. She's just saying we need to look more at the cause, the underlying, like, why is it there? Mm-hmm. And not saying, oh, you just are that way, or your brain is just different, or whatever, here's some medicine. So
right. And I think that messaging should be more uplifting. Like, you're fine.
Yeah.
There,
Yeah.
you might need a little extra something.
Definitely need some support, and
And I think, like, Western medicine is a miracle, but like it is for emergencies.
it's emergencies.
It's not for
Yes.
maintenance.
No.
And I know that really upsets a lot of people, but
Yeah. It does.
yeah, and
It does.
I think it's interesting because it's like, we look at, I think that where we are in America, we can look and say the way that we make our food is making us sick. Americans have higher blood pressure. Americans have a higher diabetes, more likely to have heart disease, all of these diseases. And we are able to acknowledge, oh, that's because of the way that we do our food. And then some people are able to acknowledge the way we do our food is related to capitalism. So why can't we realize our mental health is very much like, our brains are like any other organ. Your liver is going to get damaged from drinking too much alcohol. Your brain is going to get damaged by living in an oppressive system.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how organs work.
In unsuitable conditions. That's what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Eastern medicine will tell you have to fix the conditions or the imbalances in the body,
Mm-hmm.
which oftentimes come from the environment. So
Right.
yeah, and you said something about neurodiversity, right? It's like you wouldn't take all the plants and animals and all the creatures in the world and shove them in the Sahara Desert and be like, survive.
Right. You wouldn't do that.
Oh, you're dehydrated and you're burning to death.
Right.
You're just different.
Right.
It's not the suitable conditions for that species. And it's like, you take humans, yes, we're humans, but we're just like, our compositions are so unique that it's like there's one mold created, capitalism,
Mm-hmm.
we're all shoved into it. And then it's like, why are some people complaining so much?
Right. The camel is going, what's wrong with the penguin? Like, I don't understand.
Exactly. So, it helps to like really understand, not feel so helpless if you are suffering from mental health issues,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding like all of our health imbalances are caused by something, usually in our environment.
Right. And I think that it's no secret that when I talk to my cousins who live in Cape Verde, which is a country that is a lot more collectivist, most countries in Africa are a lot more collectivist. They are confused by my stress, and I'm not going to say that they don't have anxiety or depression. They don't know what that is. But they don't have the same culture of it. And they are like, they have a much different approach to their mental health. And I think that is a lot rooted onto their environment is more built for them to live as a community. They have a huge communal living there. And I think that the correlation is not a coincidence.
Yeah. What's that saying? It's like, people look at America and they say that we live to work, and other places work to live. It's a much better balance.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's no reason that a very, very pregnant woman should have to be working up until the very last moment she gives birth, when she's really achy and tired and ankles are swollen, but she's got to go to work. We don't. Right. It's just like, that is so. It's inhumane.
It is.
It's inhumane things that we put each other through, and we've painted it as this work hard for what you want, or otherwise, if you don't work hard, you're lazy, and everyone has the same access to the same success. And it's exhausting even like having to say that.
Right. And then on top of it, not only do we like have to live to work, but our worth is so attached to working. So then when we're living in this late stage of capitalism, where like, so many people warn about automation taking jobs. And I'm like, if we got out of capitalism, automation taking jobs is great, because then we have more time to live and be people. But within capitalism, it's like everybody more, the pool of how many people need jobs is getting bigger, and the pool of how many jobs exist is getting smaller. And we've been socialized to attach so much of our worth to our job performance that it's like, of course you're feeling inadequate when you're not working a job that you feel like you should be, or you can't find a job. Like, of course you're feeling these feelings because you live in a society that has told you don't really matter if you're not working. You're not really a productive member of society.
We've all heard it. The lazy, oh, they're just abusing the welfare. We've all heard it, And even on a personal note, when I decided to quit my very stable job to move to Europe without a place to live, without a job lined up, my parents, my dad more so, he was like, I could tell he was really disappointed because I was working, I had benefits, I was making money. Why would I want to throw that away? And for him, I get it. He came here as an immigrant, and he did his odd jobs before he really, started working in the family business. So for him, it's just like becoming here and being able to work and provide for family, like that is the best thing, that's like the ceiling for him, right?
Right.
And so I get it. So when you're saying like your worth is so attached, yeah, it was hard to see him disappointed and feel like a failure in his eyes, because I was dropping, and they put me through school. It's just like this huge like cognitive dissonance that happens if you have the privilege to drop something like that and really go on a self-discovery journey.
Yeah. There's so much rooted in it. So I think, to bring it back to Dharma, I think no wonder we don't have a deep understanding of what purpose is, because we think that our purpose is our productivity, and I think that we really got to decolonize that. We really have to decolonize that thought, because we're not meant to work. We are meant to be part of a community, but we're not meant to work.
And living shouldn't be this hard.
Right.
It wasn't meant to be this hard.
You know what I think is interesting, because when I used to argue with people who didn't believe in welfare and things like that, I don't really do that anymore. Something that they would say is like, they know that if they have more kids, they will be able to have a higher payout from the government. And I'm like, yeah, they're like, they know that if they don't have a job, they're making this amount of money with the government assistance, but if they get a job, they're going to be making this amount of money for their 4 kids. And it's like, maybe this person's thinking, I'm a mom, and that's what I'm doing right now. And if I get a job, I'm not going to be able to provide for my kids or have the time for my kids. So yeah, I'm going to exploit the system, but the system's bullshit. So, I mean, this is a person who is understanding they have one life and their life is not meant to work. It's like, good for them. Plus the rich exploit the system every day, so it's a stupid thing to care about.
Oh my gosh, no person in poverty can exploit the system worse than the millionaires, billionaires,
and the people who are literally exploiting people's people are expendable to them. But
and it's like, if we don't see that up here they're living this like looking down, just laughing at us, making us fight each other down here,
right, when there's more
fight for these resources, and they have literally the earth in their hands up here, it's laughable. But it's by design that and I like how you said one life, because I was gonna finish on that. I'm like, let's take the politics out of it, let's take the money out of it. We are on this earth for such a speck of time. Like it's such a small amount of time in the grand scheme of the universe. Why would we want to spend it miserable?
Right. Why would you want to spend it a second doing something that you don't want to do? And I know that I'm coming from a privileged position to say that, but it's like, I'm not trying, like, I deserve that, and so does somebody who lives in poverty. They also deserve to not have to do anything that doesn't work for them. They deserve to have that choice, like I have that choice.
Yep. Totally agree. And the last thing that I'll say is, if you're someone who is working a job and you feel in your soul that, like, this is not for me, like I'm miserable, there's nothing vibrant, I can't see any brightness during the day or at the end of the day, it sucks the life out of me. But then on the other hand, you're like, oh, but this is normal, like I have to work. It doesn't have to be normal. It doesn't have to be normal, and you're valid in feeling that way. And if you're in a position to even start the discovery process, while still working or, something like that, I really encourage you to do so, because you not only deserve it, but like your soul is begging you to do so.
Right. Yep. I think that's a great way to close it out. If you,
Unless you have anything you want to end with, I'm good.
Nope. I think that's a beautiful way to end it.
Thank you so much for your wisdom.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed this conversation.
It was fun.
Sorry about my phone call in the middle.
Oh, it's okay, right? You're working.
But I was getting a phone call asking me to collect information and then explain it, which is literally my joy. So it was a good.
As she's saying this, she gets that phone call. It's like, right. Oh, okay, that's a little haha from the universe, I would say.
Right. It's a little sign of like, you found it. This is what's important to you.
This is it. Also, it can evolve. I will throw that in there.
Oh,
it can evolve. Let it do its thing. You don't have to like, oh, I found my purpose, and like trap it and suffocate it to death. Right. Just let it see where it takes you.
Did you see the movie Soul? Did you watch it?
Not yet, because I don't have a Disney account.
Oh, I will. I'm going to text you my password because I need you to watch it. Like I've been dying for your thoughts.
Okay. I wanted to watch it before this, full disclosure, but I was like, crap, I don't have access to it. But
okay.
Well, then I will. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. I'll keep. There was a beautiful message of it, but I don't want to spoil it. No, only if you take your headphones out, because I don't want to spoil it. Okay, they're out. If you watch the movie Soul, a lot of it is they're trying to figure out what will their purpose be on life. And it's like they're looking for their light. And, or I can't remember what word they used. And the person who was looking for it, or the soul that was looking for it, was like, I can't find my purpose. And in the end, one of the entities was like, you're not looking for your purpose. And I felt like the message of it was, your purpose is to live, and whatever that looks like, whatever brings you joy, whatever makes you feel like you are living, is that's why you're here. So I'll end it on that. You can put your headphones back in.
That was fun. I'm gonna find a way to watch it this weekend. I really am.
I'm gonna send you my passcode right now because it's important.
Thank you. I'll watch it tonight. Well, thank you so much. I really had a good time, and I appreciate you. So,
all right, thank you.
All right, see y'all.